4 days ago, Elon Musk started digging a hole in Texas, 100 million square feet, $16.8 billion just to begin. It is a chip factory. Musk has never made a chip. The company that has is Intel. This week, Intel asked the market for $15 billion and would not say what for. Start with the ground itself. On the 6th of August, Tesla and SpaceX committed $16.8 billion to break ground in Grimes County, Texas. The project is called TerraFab. 3,000 jobs. Production as early as next year. That is only the first phase. In its own filing, SpaceX floated a ceiling for the whole thing. $119 billion. 100 million square feet with logic, memory, and advanced packaging under one roof. Almost nobody builds like that anymore. Tesla runs the research fab. SpaceX builds and runs the high-volume plant. The chips are for his own machines. Cars that drive themselves, robots, the compute behind XAI, and satellites. SpaceX wants to turn into data centers. The stated target is a terawatt of compute a year. Whether that number means anything yet is a fair question. But there is a problem with building a chip factory when you have never made a chip. You need a process. The recipe for turning sand into a working transistor is not something you invent in a year. So Musk licensed one, which raises the obvious question: whose recipe is he using? In April, Intel announced it would be the primary foundry partner for TerraFab. TerraFab will run Intel's next manufacturing process. It is called 14A. 14A is the process Intel has promised will reach high-volume production in 2028. It is the whole comeback, compressed into one node. And in July, Intel said something about it out loud that most companies would have buried. It said the node could go unbuilt without a major external customer. Read that again. Intel told its own investors that its most important product might simply not get made. So who is the major external customer? Publicly, Intel has named exactly one foundry customer, a security company called Fortinet. And that deal is on an older process, not 14A. Reuters reported that Tesla signed on for 14A. Neither Intel nor Tesla has confirmed it, which leaves the most expensive process in Intel's history resting on a customer nobody will say out loud. Then 4 days after the first shovel went in, Intel did something it had not done in most of its life. Then came the 10th of August. Intel filed to sell $15 billion of stock. Bloomberg called it what may be Intel's first public share sale since it listed in 1971. Even the wire hedged that claim, and the hedge is doing real work. 55 years. And here is the strange part. The filing does not say what the money is for. General corporate purposes. $15 billion and no project named. For a company that just told the market a node might go unbuilt, that is a loud silence. To understand why that matters, you have to follow the money backwards. To understand why Intel is asking, you have to look at what it did with the money it already had. Through the 2010s, Intel spent $82 billion buying back its own shares. A buyback is simple. The company buys its own stock off the market. Fewer shares exist, so each remaining share is worth more, and the price goes up. It is not illegal, and it's not unusual. It is a choice about where the money goes. Between 2011 and 2015, Intel's buybacks and dividends together came to 102% of its net income, more than it earned. And those are exactly the years it was fighting to make the chips inside the iPhone. Intel lost that fight. A Taiwanese company called TSMC won it and then kept winning. You do not have to take my word for any of this. The man brought in to fix Intel said it on camera.
Absolutely. And I'll just say, Intel, lost its way. And we had non-technical leadership of the most important technology company in America for a decade and a half.
A decade and a half of non-technical leadership at the company that invented the modern chip industry. He was asked directly whether government money would end up funding more buybacks. His answer is the whole story in one sentence.
Happy to say is when I showed up as CEO, I just thanked my predecessor for doing stock buybacks because he did enough that I'm never going to do any. So take that off the table.
He thanked his predecessor for using up the buybacks. That is a joke with a very sharp edge on it. And then he told them what fixing it actually costs.
Wall Street and said, hey, I'm taking the free cash flow of the company negative, for the first time in over 3 decades.
That is what building fabs looks like on a balance sheet. It is the opposite of a buyback, and it is why the money has to come from somewhere else now. It helps to see how far this company actually fell. The scale of the decline is not a matter of opinion either. It is worth remembering what this company used to be, because otherwise the number that follows does not land. Intel built the first commercial microprocessor. Its co-founder wrote the rule the entire industry has been measured against for 60 years. For most of the personal computer era, if you owned a computer, you owned an Intel processor. There was no meaningful second option. That is the company we are talking about, not a struggling supplier, the one that set the pace.
Well, the fact that we've gone from almost 50% of this industry to 20 to 12% of this industry over 30 years, it's broken.
Half the industry down to 12%, and the division that is supposed to win it back is losing money at a rate that is hard to look at. Intel's foundry business lost $10.3 billion across the 2025 financial year. In the second quarter of this year alone, it lost $2.1 billion on sales of $5.8. That is the business Musk is betting his chip supply on. One more thing happened here, and it barely got reported. There is one more thing, and it did not get much attention. Intel's own chairman reportedly tried to broker a deal to sell the factories to TSMC. The company Intel lost the decade too. The chief executive opposed it, and TSMC, by its own account, was not interested anyway. So the factories stayed, which means somebody still has to pay for them. Look at who is holding Intel up right now. A government, a rival chipmaker, a Japanese fund, the open market, and a man who makes cars and rockets. So what does all of this actually add up to? None of this means Intel is finished. Its newest process is already in high volume production, and the first laptops built on it are shipping. The government's stake, the Nvidia money, and the SoftBank money are real, and they lower the risk considerably. And Musk's factory is not a rescue mission. He is building it because he wants to stop buying his chips from anyone else. But strip the announcements away, and the shape of it is plain enough. $82 billion left this company over a decade to make its own shares more valuable. $15 billion was asked back in a single filing with no project attached to it. The factory that gets built in Texas is being paid for by somebody else entirely, and the process it will run is one Intel has already admitted might not exist without a customer big enough to justify it. That customer builds cars. Intel still has not said who is buying the wafers. Everyone assumes they know. Nobody will put it in a filing. The company that created this industry spent a decade making its shareholders richer and is now being handed its future by an outsider who had never made a chip. That is not a bailout. It is worse than that. It is a customer.